For this project, I'm going to show you how to create a YouTube thumbnail for any videos that you might want to use on YouTube. Now, you can use this process to make all kinds of different thumbnails. It doesn't have to be YouTube specific. This might be something for Facebook or Twitter or even a blog or anywhere else where you would want to use this type of image to grab attention. Now, of course, there's a lot of different types of thumbnails on YouTube, so I won't be covering all of them, but I'll show you one that's pretty common. People seem to like it and use it a lot, and it's because it uses nice bold text and really just kinds of draws you in and grabs your attention right from the beginning. So the first thing that you want to do is head over to YouTube's help desk, and I just did a search for thumbnails, and we want to look at the requirements for the thumbnail on YouTube because it's important that we kind of follow their guidelines, so when we create this, we're using the right resolution and dimensions and so forth so that it uploads nicely and looks good on YouTube. So if we scroll down here, we see add video thumbnails, and if we go to the custom thumbnail best practices, there's image size and resolution. We'll click on that drop down box, and then it's going to tell us the information that we need to know when creating this image. So it says your custom thumbnail should be as large as possible, as the image will also be used as a preview image in the embedded player. We recommend your custom thumbnail have a resolution of 1280 by 720 with a minimum width of 640 pixels. Uploaded in image formats such as JPG, GIF, BMP, or PNG, remain under the 2 megabyte limit and use a 16 by 9 aspect ratio as it's most used in YouTube players and previews. So I'll just go through these real quick. The first one is the resolution. This is how many pixels wide and high your image needs to be. Now, it does say that you can use the highest image size as possible, but it also wants you to keep the size of the actual file under 2 megabytes. And the reason for that is because YouTube is displaying a lot of these at one time, and they want to load those images quickly, so they want a small file size. So you could use a different resolution, like say 1920 by 1080, which is a common 16 by 9 HD resolution. That will work, but just keep in mind the higher resolution you go up, the more you increase the file size, and you might run into an issue. So for this project, we'll just go ahead and use the recommended size of 1280 by 720. And then it says it can be uploaded in JPG, GIF, BMP, and PNG. Now, YouTube is big enough where it can really handle any of these okay. Some are used for different purposes than others. PNGs have transparent backgrounds, but we're not going to be dealing with transparent backgrounds. BMP are uncompressed files, but we're actually going to save it out as a JPG file. The JPG file is a compressed file, and it's going to keep the image looking really nicely, but it's going to help reduce the file size limit also. So we're going to use the recommended resolution, and we're going to pick the JPG compressed file size, try to keep it under the 2 megabyte limit, and then the 16 by 9 aspect ratio is already included in the 1280 by 720 resolution. This is just saying you don't want to use some strange aspect ratio, like say 1000 pixels by 1000 pixels. That would be a 1-to-1 aspect ratio. It would be a square, and that's not what we want. We want this HD 16 by 9 aspect ratio, and you will find that under 1280 by 720 or the one I mentioned before, 1920 by 1080. But for right now, let's just stick with this resolution. We'll export as a JPG file, and we will keep it under 2 megabytes. So let's go ahead and head over to Photoshop. So now we're in Photoshop, and we can begin working on this image. Now, you can go ahead and follow along with the image that I've provided here, or you can use any image that you'd like. But I think it's important to go ahead and take note that starting with a very powerful image is really going to go a long way whenever you're creating any type of thumbnail. It doesn't matter if it's for YouTube or social media or anywhere else. If you can start with a good, captivating image at the beginning, then it makes your job a little easier. So this is just a stock photo that I found online under the free Creative Commons license, and there's plenty of websites you can check out. Some of them are pexels.com, pixabay.com, and splash.com. Flickr has a free Creative Creative Commons area, and there's you can find a bunch of different photos that you can use online. But this is a great image because it has good composition, good lighting, it's very powerful, and the image stands on its own. So just sticking this image up into a thumbnail by itself would really pull the audience in. They would notice this image. You may be using an image of yourself, and if you're doing something like that, maybe you want to take a handful of images and pick the best one, or find an image like this. Now, like I said, there's different types of YouTube thumbnails that you can create, and so this is just one version that's kind of popular, but I'll show you how to create it now. So if you want to follow along with this image, go ahead and open up that image now. Now, if you go ahead and you look in the document properties panel, you will see that this is a very large image. It's almost 6,000 pixels by about 3,700 pixels, give or take. So it's a lot bigger than the resolution that we need for YouTube. Now, we could go ahead and trim down the canvas size and resize this, but I'm going to show you how to open this up into a new document. So if you ever want to move images or photos from one file to another file, I'll show you how to do that. So go up to the top and click on File, and then click on New, and that will bring up the new document window. And when this comes up, we can go ahead and put in our own custom dimensions. Now, let's just say that you have the default Photoshop size of 5 inches by, or 7 inches by 5 inches, 300 pixels per inch. We want to go ahead and change this on the right hand side. So the first thing that we can do is we can give this a name. So let's go ahead and name this now. And then we want to change the width and height. Now, we're not working in inches, we want to work in pixels. So go ahead and click on that drop down and then select pixels. And you can see the pixel dimensions are 2100 by 1500. Now, we could do a higher resolution like 1920 by 1080, which is 16 by 9 in high def, but we're going to stick with YouTube's recommended standards because we want to keep the file size small and we want to make sure that it loads really well, and so we need a smaller file size. So let's just go ahead and put in the recommended amounts of 1280 by 720. That's still a 16 by 9 aspect ratio. And we're going to take the resolution down to 72 pixels per inch. 300 pixels per inch is great if you are working with print media, but anything online, you want to keep it a little lower, again, to reduce the file size. We can leave the color mode to RGB since we're working online, and we can leave it to 8-bit colors. Again, we want to keep the file size low, so we want to keep the amount of colors down. Now, the background contents, we're not really going to use a background. We're going to use the image as our background. You can make this whatever you would like, whatever feels comfortable. If you like starting white or starting black, if you grab this scroll bar over here and go down, you can actually make it transparent, which if you've used Photoshop in the past to create new documents, this might feel better for you too. So we'll just make it transparent and then hit the create button. Now that is going to go ahead and create the new document for us. And let's see, if we go to, okay, so I went to the move tool and I just clicked out in the center, and you can see on the right hand side in the properties, it's 1280 pixels by 720 pixels at 72 pixels per inch. So this is the right size and resolution that YouTube requires, and this is what we're going to make our image in. It's created a layer called layer 1. It's not locked down, and because we see that checkerboard pattern, that is a transparent background. It basically means that there is nothing there. Not a checkerboard pattern, but absolutely nothing is there right now. But again, we're not going to use that, so that's of no concern. So now what we want to do is we want to move our image over into this document. First of all, let's go ahead and save this. I always like to save at the beginning, and then that way I can just hit a shortcut key to keep saving as I keep working. So go up to the top, go to File, and then Save is grayed out because we haven't made any changes and we haven't saved this yet. So go ahead and click the Save As button, and this will allow us to save it. Then make sure you go to the file that you would like to keep it in. It's going to bring in the name that we called it. So I called it YouTube Thumbnail, and that's what it's going to be. And this is a PSD file. That way we can create layers and edit those layers later on. Whenever you have that ready to go, hit the Save button in the bottom right hand corner. And then just go ahead and make sure maximize compatibility is turned on. I'm going to go ahead and click on don't show again so I don't have to view this anymore, and then hit OK. So that'll go ahead and save the document out for us. And as we begin making edits, we want to continually be saving. To do that, you can go to the top and you can go to File. And as you begin making edits, this will actually be highlighted so you can click on it. It's still grayed out because we haven't done anything to the document yet. But you can click on Save here, or you can hit the shortcut key Control S for Windows or Command S for Mac OS. And that's a shortcut key I'm going to be using as I save this document and as I begin making edits. Okay, so let's go ahead and bring the image over. You'll notice at the top that we have the adult blur business.jpg, that's the image of our camera, and then we have the YouTube thumbnail.psd file, which we're working on. And you can see we're zoomed in at 100%, so this is the actual size that this will create it in. If we zoom in, we'll be at 200%, and we can move around the workspace, and if we zoom out twice, we'll be at 66%, 3 times at 50%. And we'll be zooming in and out as we begin working. And to do that, I'm just holding Control or Command and hitting the plus or minus buttons. So go up to the top and click on this tab where the image is. And what we want to do is we want to move this image over. Now the easiest way to do this is just go over to the Layers panel and single click and hold down onto the layer. And as you begin dragging around, you will see that that layer is now being able to be moved. So I don't know if you can see it. It's really kind of grayed out or transparent, but I've grabbed that layer. Now, if I go up to the document that we're working in and I just keep holding over that tab, I haven't let go of my mouse yet. If I hold over the tab, it'll actually go to that document with my cursor. And then I can come out here in the middle of this document and just let go, and it will actually drop that image into this document. Now you can see it's created a new layer called Layer 2, and it's brought in our image. However, because this image is so much larger than our workspace, it's getting clipped off, and you can see a zoomed in version of what looks like the hand right here. Let's go ahead and just rename this layer. I'm going to double click on it and call this Original. And we don't need layer 1 anymore, so we can just click on that, and then we can hit the trash can, and it'll say, are you sure you want to delete this? We can hit yes, and now we just have this image, the original layer with the image on it. Now, because we're done with the original image, you can leave it open if you would like to. I'm going to just go ahead and close it out. I like to keep a nice clean workspace, so I'm going to hit this exit button next to the tab, and it's going to close it. So now I just have the one tab open with our YouTube thumbnail. And what we want to do is we want to resize this document. So to do that, we need to actually scale down the layer. So whenever you are shrinking or stretching anything, we call that a scale. And to do that, we're going to go up to the top and click on Edit, go down to Transform, and then go to Scale. Go ahead and click on that. So once you do, it doesn't look like anything has changed or anything has happened. Now we have some new options at the top, and you can see that there is a width and a height with a lock icon showing that they're locked together and some percentages. So we could actually scale the image right here by typing in 50% or 25%. However, I want to show you how you can actually manually scale this, and to see that we need to zoom out because this image is so much larger. So I'm going to hit Control or Command and hit the minus sign a couple times until we see the bounding box of that image. Now this is how big the image actually is. If you remember, it's 6,000 pixels across, and our workspace is only 1,280, so this is a much larger image. Well, to scale this down, all we have to do is just click on one of these corners and then drag it in, and it will scale it down for us. And as we do, you can see a tooltip pop up that shows us the new dimensions. So I'm not going to go all the way just yet. I'll go ahead and grab this corner and pull this side in. And then now that we can work with this, I'm going to go ahead and zoom back in. So I'm going to hit Control or Command and the plus key. And now we're into a nice workspace where we can see everything, and we can go ahead and bring this in a little more. So I'm going to go ahead and bring this in until the edges touch. and this looks good. Now you'll notice that it's overshooting at the bottom and at the top just a little bit. And the problem is because this image isn't the same aspect ratio as the 16:9. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but it's a different size than what our workspace is. So the only way that we could compensate for that is if we grab the bottom handle and we brought that in to line it up. We could get the bottom to line up, but as you can see, it gives us a blank space on the left and right hand side, and that's not really what we want, because whenever we export this image, it's going to fill that in with black and our thumbnail's not going to look right. So I would rather at least line up the sides and then move the image up or down based on what I want to see in the image. So for instance, I've got the image at pretty low to the bottom here, and you can see that he's kind of sitting a little lower, the camera's a little lower than the midline, or we can move it up. I can click and drag, and then it'll snap to the center once I see those purple guidelines pop up. So now the camera's right in the center, and this looks pretty good. This is definitely something that we could use, or I can move it to the top where he's a little bit higher than the midline and it's cutting off his hat. We see a little more of the body. It all depends on the image that you're using and some of the white space and negative space and the focal point and so forth. For this particular image, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the center, and I don't want the camera perfectly center because just with basic composition, I like to have everything a little bit higher or lower than the center line. So I'm just going to move it up slightly above center so that the camera is not perfectly in the center, but it's just above it, and this looks like a good composition. His hat's getting chopped off a little bit, which isn't too bad because at least the hat's not, touching the borders, and it looks really good here. So once we have that where we want that, you can just go ahead and hit the enter key and it will save that scale. So now we have our image where we want it, and what we want to do is we want to create a duplicate layer and then lock down this original layer. That way, if we ever have any problems, we can come back to that original layer. It's just something that I prefer doing whenever I begin working. So if you go over to the original layer, you can right click, and then you can go up to duplicate layer. And then it's going to ask you for a name. So we're just going to call this man, and then we're going to hit OK. And it has just made a duplicate of that original layer. Both layers are exactly the same. So here's the original layer. If I hide it and show the man layer, they're both the same. So let's go ahead and we'll show the original layer, and we want to lock this down. So go ahead and click on the lock icon for that layer, and you'll see it pop up over here. And now that is locked down, we can't accidentally move it or mess it up. And let's go ahead and hide it too. So to hide and show things, there's a little eyeball in the layers panel. If you click on the eyeball, it will toggle the visibility on and off. So if I turn them both off, we see the transparent background. If I turn on the original, it's there, but we want to hide that. And let's go ahead and turn on visibility for the man layer. Now what we're going to do is we're going to do all of our editing with the man layer and leave the original alone. And that's just, something that I prefer, because if I ever make a mistake or I get too many edits going on at one time and I can't back out and I need the original, I have it right here for me. So this is a good setup. Let's go ahead and save this out now so that we can always at least start back at this point if, say, the computer crashes. So I'm going to go up to the top, I'm going to go to File, and then I'm going to go down to Save. Or you can hit Control S or Command S to save that out. And that'll just go ahead and overwrite the YouTube thumbnail.psd file that we saved out. Now going forward, I'm not going to tell you every time that I save, but I recommend that you just do it, especially if you make any really good edits or as you begin working for any amount of time. Learn that shortcut key, Control S for Windows or Command S for Mac OS, and just constantly be saving that document. Or some people like to save multiple versions. So as you do one set of edits, you might call it YouTube Thumbnail 1, and then you do your next set of edits and you call it YouTube Thumbnail 2, and you make kind of version histories if you need to go back in the time and go to a previous version. But I'm going to be saving as we go throughout this editing process. I'm just not going to tell you every time that I do it, but I do want to make sure that you get into the habit of saving often.